Okay, I think I have another example that I want to go through. Okay, here we go. This next part, I want to sketch the square root of f of x when we're given that original function f of x is equal to x squared plus x minus 2. And we want to state the domain and range. Okay, first of all, let's draw the original graph. So here, my original function is f of x is equal to x squared plus x minus 2. This is a parabola, and usually for these cases, we're going to try factorize it if possible. I can factorize this, x plus 2, x minus 1. And so I've got my zeros at x is equal to negative 2, x is equal to 1. Now, let's draw this. So here, I'm going to put on my zeros at, let's go a little bit further. Oh, let's go to here. Negative 2, and this is 1. Now, we have a look at this graph. It's actually a concave up graph. I've also got let me put on a few extra details. I've got a negative 2 y-intercept. It's a concave up graph. And so my original function f of x is going to look something like this. Now, you might be wondering, so why aren't you finding the vertex or the axis of symmetry? Now, there's a really good point. That's a really good point. I should probably find it, and I've actually I did this beforehand, and I actually found that the vertex was at negative 1/2. And I think it was negative 2 1/4, which was negative 9 on 4. So we've got a vertex there. But I'm just going to go through a few particular reasons why I didn't do that when we're trying to graph y is equal to the square root of f of x. Now, if you remember the second dot point, the first dot point here is delete everything below the x-axis. Now, if you have a look here, where's the graph below the x-axis? Well, basically, any point between 0 and 1 is below the x-axis. So I'm actually going to, for my square root function, I'm going to delete all of that stuff because it's below the x-axis. So for this question, I don't need to worry too much about the vertex because it's below the x-axis. So here, I can delete all of those parts there. Okay, so that is part, I can get rid of that. That's all good. I don't need to worry about that when I'm drawing square root of f of x. Now, the other point that we need to worry about is where y is equal to 1. So let's actually find where y is equal to 1. So if I'm trying to find where y is equal to 1, I'm just going to solve for f of x is equal to 1. So x squared plus x minus 2 is equal to 1. And so I'm going to solve that. I'm going to move all my terms to one side. So I've got a quadratic here. There's no easy way to factorize this, so I'm going to have to use the quadratic equation. So I'm going to go, well, x is equal to negative b, so negative 1, plus or minus square root of 1 squared, negative 1 squared, minus 4 times 1 times negative 3 ac over 2. 2 times a. Okay, so that's negative 1 plus or minus, and I think that gives you square root 13 over 2. Okay, so if I was to put this on my graph, this is y is equal to 1. And I have 2 intercepts at those points. So this one here is negative 1 minus square root 13 on 2. And the other one over here is negative 1 plus square root 13 on 2. Okay, so I've got my 2 points where my graph touches y is equal to 1. Now, the reason why I have y is equal to 1 is because my square root graph is going to be equal to my quadratic, my original graph, when y is equal to 0 or y is equal to 1. So there's a few points here. I'm going to draw my new graph in purple. So this point here, my new graph is going to be there, and also at this x-intercept at negative 2. And same on the other side, 1 and this point over here. Now, the additional thing is, if the graph is between 0 and 1, my square root graph is going to be above it. If the graph is above 1, so above y is equal to 1, then my square root graph is going to be below it. So putting this all together, let's start on the left-hand side. So between 0 and 1, so between my x-axis and that light blue dotted line, my graph is going to be above it. So I'm going to be above it, so I'm going to be on top of it. So the y value is going to be on top of it. And then after 1, above 1, it's going to be below. So it's going to look something like this. And on the other side, I'm going to go something like this. And there we go. That is my square root graph for this one here. Once again, if you need to go back and have a look at any particular part, feel free to. Now, here is also asked me to find the domain and range. Now, the domain is probably the one thing we need to worry about. Now, the domain, this graph only exists to the left of, my square root graph only exists to the left of -2 and to the right of, +1. So here, my domain is going to be x is in between -infinity to -2, which is that left-hand side, and close bracket because it's equal to 1 to infinity. So that's the domain. Now the range, where does my square root graph exist? Well, it's only above the x-axis. So here the range is going to be just 0 to infinity. So that is my domain and range for this function here, this square root graph. Okay,